All right. So today we have the pleasure of having Will Laurenson, CEO of Customers Who Click. You've also got your own podcast, which is super valuable, also called Customers Who Click. You're turning traffic into customers using the UAM method, which is definitely something we're going to talk about in this episode, and I'm really excited for it. All in all, yeah, just excited to have a great chat today. So, Will, thank you very much for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Love it. Amazing. So we've chatted already before, and you've got a super interesting story in terms of how you got into the space. I feel everyone's got such a unique story of how they started, and they always have a bit of a unique way of getting into the CRO experimentation industry. Can you please walk us down memory lane on how everything started for you and how you got here today?
Yeah, sure. So, um, try and keep this reasonably short. I was in startups at the start of my career. Went through a few. I worked. The first company was kind of this incubator thing, where it was like a group of companies, a few different startups in there. So I got a big experience there. Um, but it was actually two companies after that where I had almost exactly the same experience. Right. So I came into one as marketing manager, and the other one as head of marketing, and both products were digital. So the first one was a magazine app, bit like Spotify for magazines, and the other one was it was actually, well, it was a car club, but you booked it through the app, right? So there was a lot of digital interaction with the customer, and both companies were fairly well funded, and their approach was, here's money, marketing team, like the product is built, now go sell it, right? Go acquire customers and go grow the business. And we could see that on the marketing side, we were doing quite well, right? We were able to get a lot of traffic, click-through rates were good, um, and we knew people kind of liked the service that we offered, but there was a big gap in between, and that gap was converting people, so getting people to actually sign up, sign up on the landing page, create their full account. For the car club, we had to verify people, so we had to get their driving license and a bit more detail. And then even like sometimes the experience within the apps themselves were not as optimized as they could have been. And so we were struggling there. And so I ended up having to push back quite a bit and say, we're spending all this money. We're spending 100 grand a month per country. And we're getting leads, right? We're building up our database of people who have signed up, but our actual paying customer base is still really small as a percentage of that. And we're confident it's not an issue with our marketing, and it's not necessarily an issue with the idea of the product. It's just the experience itself wasn't good enough. So both these companies, I ended up kind of pushing myself into the product team, and to the higher ups and saying, look, we've got to fix things. I've been doing this research. We've been running these surveys. I've been speaking to customers in the UK. I can tell you right now, the problems we're having are, some people don't understand actually what we do, because of our landing pages, which we didn't have control of as the marketing team. As we were given the landing page by the product team, and people are having all these different problems with the app experience. So again, like another example with the car club was, they rebuilt the app, right, and replatformed it, because originally the app was it was essentially a website skinned within an app, right? To get the app out quicker. So they rebuilt it, relaunched it, and completely missed the fact that UK postcodes work a bit differently to everywhere else. I'm pretty sure. I think everywhere else. I might be wrong, but most places. To the point where a postcode, like in central London, a postcode is most likely going to be a building, right? And the way they did address lookup in the app didn't allow you to do it that way.
Wow. Okay.
Right? You could only select, like the lookup tool they used only allowed you to go as far as the road, like the street name, the city, and the postcode, obviously, but there was no space to add the actual house number and stuff like that. So we had to push back and say, it doesn't work like this in the UK, right? If you're going to force people to use this function, it's got to work properly for us. Um, so yeah, I started doing more research, understanding customers, a bit of testing. When we took control of landing pages, we started to use Unbounce, and started to run some tests there, and we could see good improvements based on the changes that we were making. So I was able to then take that data to kind of the C-suite and the product team and say, look, this is what our customers are telling us, this is what data tells us, and this is what our testing is telling us. We have to fix these things. There's no point spending more money if we can't fix these things. And that was, I guess, my first accidental experience with CRO, really. And I started to read more of CXL blogs and things like that. Um, and I just really enjoyed it. I really liked that kind of research data side of it and problem solving. Identifying a problem, coming up with solutions to it, or ideas and solutions, testing things, experimenting, like playing around with things, rather than just trying to come up with lists of keywords and things for SEO and PPC, which I just didn't care about. Like I didn't. It was the worst days in my career was when I was having to review SEO keywords and stuff like that. I was like, I just don't care about this. It's not exciting. It's not interesting to me at all.
That is, first of all, I agree with the SEO part, but that's a very interesting beginning, a very interesting story. And I love that the point you joined was where the product from what you could see was already confirmed. You had the budget and you could then experiment and actually see what do people really respond to, because the product is already confirmed, the budget is there. I'm just wondering, when you brought that data or those changes to the C-suite level, how did they respond? Because I can imagine it depends, obviously, maybe with the culture, with everything. Sometimes they're very open to it. Sometimes they're very much like, this is the vision we have. This is what we're going to do. How did they respond? Were they positive to it? Were they a bit like, forget about it? What was that like?
Well, initially I had just that reaction, right? This is the roadmap we've got to work to, and it wasn't so much, no, we're not going to do that.
Mhm.
It was just, we don't have the time because this is what our roadmap is.
Okay.
So we're going to have to fit that in. After the first company, it was like build out our own email system and our own referral tool. And I'm sat there like, why? This is 2015. There wasn't actually nearly as much tech as there is now. Just in the last like 8-9 years, the amount of options
Oh yeah.
is amazing. But there were still options out there for off the shelf tools to do these things, and they planned it into their roadmap to build them. So it was when I was able to take that research and some of the testing data from the landing pages back to them. That's when it really started to hit home with them, and they were like, "Oh, okay. Like now we can see that if you apply these changes, sometimes even just a bit of messaging, that's making a big difference to people." And there were a few other things like, I get it's not exactly traditional CRO, but um, looking into the data of the app, for example, and seeing that if people take certain actions, they're more likely to be a subscriber long term,
Okay.
right? So we knew, so the magazine app, for example, I think it was something like if we can get them to read 3 magazines within 7 days,
Cool.
regardless of their trial period, right? If we can get 3 magazines within 7 days, they are like significantly more likely to be a paid subscriber at the end of their trial. So, not being able to do anything in the app, we just turned to email. And we said, well, like, so what do we need these emails to do? These emails have to get people reading more. So we started putting more recommendations in there. And then we actually we ended up building out a personalization engine sort of thing, which worked on, let's see if I can remember. I think we had 2 different types. One was based on what you're reading,
Hmm. Okay.
and one was based on what other people are reading, but there was some sort of element of it's still relevant to you.
Okay.
So it was like if you read like a sports magazine, we can recommend you other sports magazines, but then we can also recommend you the top 3 magazines from other categories. Oh, that was it. That other sports people are reading.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So we were trying to get people to read more magazines in their category, as well as trying to get them interested in other magazines. Because then we also had like cost data, right? So we were able to say to people, you know, you're spending $9.99 a month on your subscription. The magazines you have read this month would have cost you, you know, £37
Mhm.
if you'd bought them all. So really trying to show that value to them as well. And you know, again, some of that started, you know, quite MVP,
Mhm.
right? So the initial message for that cost saving was actually we designed a check, put it in the email, and we said the average person, the average Readly user, spends something like, sorry, would have spent,
Mhm.
I think it was about £47 a month on magazines that they're reading in Readly, but instead they're paying 9.99.
Okay.
So we were able to use that messaging to kind of reinforce things. And as you know, we obviously tested that. We saw a positive response to that message. So that again allowed me to go back to the product team and say, we need to actually find a way of building this calculation in because this message works. What if we can get this into a cancellation flow and say, you know, did you realize with Readly you've spent, you know, 99 quid this year, but if you'd bought these magazines, you would have spent 870
Yeah.
or something like that, right? You know, that message would be really, really powerful.
That is so interesting. I find everything you just said there is, especially, you said it isn't necessarily the conventional CRO, but I guess it is just changing the way people behave, with
Yeah.
if they read more, so regardless if it's, okay, here's what people are reading in the sports articles, here's what people that like sports also read, just everything to get them to read more. And I think that what you probably learned from there is so valuable in terms of, okay, how can I change behavior and how can I optimize the overall journey and the process? This then has led you to starting your own agency. What are the steps like from there? So you're helping this company with the optimization. How do you then take the sort of leap, the jump to saying, okay, I'm going to start my own thing now? And how did that basically go? How did you get everything started? I'm just curious to see what those steps are.
Uh, well, the real answer is I got handed a load of money to leave my last job.
Okay.
Um, you know, I got offered voluntary redundancy because the role
Mhm.
didn't make sense
Okay.
at the time. It's the short version of this is I was there on a maternity cover contract.
Okay.
I did that for 18 months, got moved into a brand new role that had just launched. Um, but that role came too early.
Okay.
That role wasn't really needed for probably another year
Mhm.
because their international expansion stuff just it was taking longer than they expected in terms of tech and all the other abilities. So yeah, they basically said to me, look, you're going to be sat around unhappy for the next 12 months if you stay. So here are your options. Gave me a load of cash. I phoned up my best mate on the way to the tube station that morning and said, uh, they've offered me this amount of money to go. And he said, well, you've always literally like the first thing was just, well, you've always wanted to do your own thing. So take the money and go.
Okay. Okay.
So, so I
Which is
did.
what you did. Okay. Yeah.
Um, Sat around for a bit, trying to figure out what exactly that would look like. Um, and yeah, it's gone from there. So that was November 19. So about what, four and a half years ago now.
Mhm.
And it's going really well. And you know, we changed the name. The original name was Monkey Blocks, just
Oh,
because I had the name.
yeah, okay.
Didn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
And it was actually my podcast was called Customers Who Click before
Okay.
the agency was.
Okay.
I just decided that that was a far better name, and it didn't make sense to have two brand names. So we kind of just merged them, and yeah, been going ever since.
Okay, it's true. Yeah, between Monkey Block and customers who click, also in terms like CRO, you want customers to click. So I love that. That's also a very interesting story. So you were kind of forced into doing what you wanted to do, which was, start your company, have your own project. Like you said, so good news to hear that it's going really, really well. In terms then of acquiring customers and getting new clients, I'm just curious to see from your experience, if we go a little bit now more into CRO and everything, What are some common client misconceptions, whether it's on sales calls or even when you onboard them, they expect something, but that's just not reality. What are some common misconceptions you've noticed?
I think that there's probably two big ones that come to mind immediately. I'm sure you guys see the same thing. The first thing is the expectation that we will raise their general store conversion rate
Hmm.
20 to 30% within a few months.
Yeah.
And that's what they see. And that doesn't happen. And the reason that doesn't happen is, as you're aware, is seasonality,
Yeah.
right? And there's all the other things that are going on. You know, if we can make some changes and improve your conversion rates, you know, if I run a test on a cart page, for example, and we get a 10% improvement to conversion, that's a 10% improvement on the people in the cart page, not the whole website. So actually, the impact on conversion rate on the website might be 0.2%, right? Depending on how many people actually gets cut. So that's part of the reason you're not really going to see much difference in your conversion rate
Hmm.
through just A/B testing like that. But also, yeah, the fact that seasonality,
Yeah.
right? We go into Black Friday, your conversion rate goes through the roof. And then we come out Black Friday, conversion rate plummets. For some brands, conversion rate goes way back up in January because that's their season,
Yeah.
and for others, it stays down. And what's really interesting is that a lot of brands understand that when they're talking about ads, they understand seasonality, and yet for the conversion rate side, that that understanding goes out the window, and something like, well, why is our conversion rate down?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it's because you're trying to sell swimwear in January in the UK,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't of course you're not going to sell it. Um, and um, the other misconception is that CRO is just A/B testing.
Yeah.
Right? It's not. A/B testing is just it's one of the tools that we use
Mhm.
to to prove our hypotheses and what we're doing, and obviously test and learn from things. But it's by far the only thing that CRO does. We try and get involved in pretty much anywhere in the business we can. So if we can help a brand reduce returns, we'll focus some time on that. If we can help them improve AOV, or conversion rates, if they are very acquisition focused, for example, if they're a subscription brand, we'll work on that. We want to reduce returns, we want to reduce discounting, and you know disc by reducing discounting, we might actually see a drop in conversion rate
Yeah.
because discounts incentivize people to buy. But if we can if we can reduce the amount of money that brand is giving away in discounts by more than the amount of money they lose from that small decrease in conversion rate, they're better off.
Yeah.
And they've got more people buying at full value. And also, what we tend to see is when we have reduced this, when we've reduced the combination of incentives, we see a slight drop in returns as well, because you get some returns from people who have absolutely no intention of actually buying and using this product. They bought it on an impulse because they saw 20% off, free shipping, free delivery, and they went, well, why not? I like the look of it, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
It turns up, sits in a box for a week. They eventually open it, look at it, and go, oh, why on earth did I buy this? And it just gets sealed straight back up and back in the post.
Yeah.
So we view CRO as more, well, we view it as customer revenue optimization,
Nice.
really, which is looking at all the different touch points. How can we make sure all traffic and all customers are as valuable as possible, not only in terms of the amount they're spending with a brand, but the amount they're costing a brand as well.
I think already from your answer, you just see how more complete and how more there is to CRO than just optimizing the conversion rate, right? I guess we kind of shot ourselves in the foot when calling it conversion rate optimization, because there's so much more than just that. I love the way you put it.
Well, so CRO, I was thinking about this not too long ago because I did a talk in Milan early May,
Nice.
and this was part of what I was talking about. CRO, conversion rate optimization, works really well for B2B.
Yeah.
Because a lot of B2B is lead gen,
Yeah.
quotes, contacts, demos, and the only thing you really care about for that is conversion rate. You just want as many people filling out that form as possible. So it does make sense there. But for e-commerce, there's so many different things that vary it. If I mean, just the very fact that in testing, we don't use conversion rate as our primary metric for testing. We use revenue per user or per session, because if we increase conversion rate, but the AOV of everyone comes down, the brand might lose money on that test. Right? So it might look fantastic from an increased conversion rate point of view, but if they're losing money, it's pointless, right? And that's just like I mentioned before, with returns, discounts, and everything. That's just one small example of it. So conversion rate is just one of the metrics we look at.
Yeah.
And so you just reminded me as well. I wouldn't say it's not a misconception I've heard actually like spoken about and mentioned by brands,
Mhm.
but I think it's maybe quite clear in what they say. This is how they view it. CRO is not a marketing channel, right? It doesn't sit alongside PPC, paid media, SEO, email. It's more like a growth discipline, I suppose, that sits underneath everything and supports them all, right? Obviously, as CROs, we do have our actions, right? We run our tests, we try and improve conversion rate, AOV on the website, but a lot of what we're doing also is just designed to make email better, to make PPC better, like I said, to reduce returns, help customer service out, all of these other things. So yeah, I guess it's when people are saying, our focus is on PPC right now. We don't want to add CRO into the mix. I think that's where there is that misunderstanding maybe.
Mhm.
But I don't think they quite grasp that.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's just worth understanding that CRO is marketing, but it's not a marketing channel, I guess is how I'd maybe explain
Very,
it.
yeah, very true. You make a lot of good points there, especially also with B2B and then e-com, completely different. And then, yeah, it's not, I was just going to add to what you were saying, which is exactly true, that it's not a marketing channel, but what you learn from CRO, from the research, from the tests, can then be directly implemented in your retention strategy, your acquisition strategy. And yeah, it's just super valuable. And it's either Google Ads or CRO. It can, and if possible, should be both, I think, because they just complement each other beautifully. And you put something on LinkedIn, a post recently that I loved, where you mentioned optimize before you need it. I was wondering, for some brands that are, still at that sort of smaller stage, they don't have huge amounts of traffic, of data, and maybe some of their A/B tests, if they run them, they might be underpowered, underperforming statistically wise. How can they actually start optimizing when they're not at that sort of typical point where you would do CRO, A/B testing, and all that? How can smaller brands handle this?
Yeah, so I guess one point on just the website itself would be that if you've got a theme from Shopify
Hmm.
and you've set up with Shopify, you might have done some customization to it when you wanted to launch and stuff. That website is probably good enough,
Okay.
right, to do the basics, right?
Mhm.
The basics are like you have navigation, you have search, your product page is going to be laid out in a roughly similar way to everyone else. That's fine.
Mhm.
Don't try and drastically change that. Don't worry about that too much. The key thing is going to be messaging and the content of the website,
Okay.
right? So your PDPs, do people understand what your products do, how it's going to help them, and why they should buy it? That's really all that matters, right? As soon as you start complicating the actual user experience on the website, that's when you're probably going to do more damage than good, especially if you're not A/B testing. But if you look at, I've seen some really, really basic PDPs out there where there's barely any information on them. And so really just going out, doing some customer research, finding out what people care about with your products, what the important information is, and just making sure it's on the page, that's going to do an okay job.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other part I'd say is use landing pages. Right. So if you're a small brand with a limited number of SKUs, or even if you've got quite a few SKUs, but you've got a handful that are your top sellers, use landing pages. Go with quite specific targeting with the ads. Run them to specific landing pages, and then kind of run the conversion through that. and maybe don't worry so much about the generic side of the website.
I find that super interesting what you mentioned there, which is if it's a basic Shopify theme, instead of trying to change the way navigation works and all that, everyone's used to the hamburger menu at the top, the search option, just the classic stuff, the different features or the different filtering options. I mean, how can you then know if the change you're making in messaging, and maybe you're adding more information on certain images because people generally scroll through those? How can you know if the changes you're making on a smaller brand are positively impacting the store and perhaps not negatively?
I mean, it's difficult to give real examples of this because you know I'm thinking of it as a brand who might be in a very limited stage,
Hmm.
right? So if they can go and say, well, let's put a few more products images on our pages, let's get some lifestyle images, let's make sure we've got 3 bullet points in the description that clearly explain, what the product is, why it's going to benefit people, and that sort of thing. That most likely will have an increased performance for them.
Yeah.
And the way to look at that would be the conversion funnel itself,
Okay.
right? So how many people, out of the people who land on your website, how many of them view a product? How many of those people add to cart? How many of those people start checkout? And how many complete checkout? And and look at where you're making improvements to that part of the funnel as
Okay.
part of that.
Yeah.
And I think once you've got to that point where your changes are less noticeable in the data,
Hmm.
you probably should be A/B testing at that point anyway.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes
Right?
sense. So,
But I mean, here, I think really for the smaller scale brands, I think we're talking about if you're going to be making changes without testing, you're probably missing something from the website.
mhm,
So we are talking about adding things and adding information that is missing from the website rather than optimization and changes
yeah.
to it. Right. So as long as you've got, if you've already got, and you're confident in this, that you've got that key messaging on the page, on the pages, you've got some good product imagery, you've got a few reviews maybe. If you're struggling at that point, your problem is more likely going to be on the ad side, I think, and on that traffic generation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly what you said with in terms of messaging as well. Because what I find super interesting during user testing sometimes is when people get on the product page, they just say like, "There's no information. It's just the product is just there. It's like on a shelf. There's no motivation. It's just here it is. Add to cart." And you're not really telling people why they should buy it. Why should you buy it here? How is it? This going to positively impact your life? So I love what you mentioned to just make sure that the messaging is right. And if
Mhm.
people follow this advice, they get to the point where they can start doing CRO, and now they actually unlock or they join the UAM framework club, right? Which is something I'd love to talk about, which is exactly what you guys are doing. Can you walk us through your framework, your method with the UAM framework, please?
Yeah, sure. So the UAM stands for usability, anxiety, and motivation. So usability is the functionality of the website, right?
Hmm.
Does it work properly? Can people find the products they want to buy? Can they select any options or customizations, and can they make that purchase? Right, and that's why I said, if you've got a pretty standard theme through Shopify, you're probably doing the basics of usability fine,
Hmm.
right? It's only when people start to mess with it that you really start to see problems. But then there is of course optimization on top. But for smaller brands, as long as you can look at your website and say all like the best practices are there, right? Hamburger menu, search in the top right, cart, um, you know, PDP laid out in generally a normal format, um, all that sort of stuff. You're probably fine, right? There's nothing wrong with the website. You can do better,
Hmm.
but you haven't got anything to worry about. Is
Okay.
is kind of how I put it. And then we're also looking at site speed, right? So we want to make sure our website's fast. Um, the next part of it is anxiety, right? So these are the questions and concerns people have when buying from a business. So these are product questions. So is this the right size? Is it the right model? Um, how do I? You've got kind of I guess pre-purchase, pre-use, and like future consideration concerns as well, right? So um, for some reason, I always use this example of a standing desk because I use one. Um, I want to know, is it the right size, right? Dimension wise, is this going to fit in the space that I've got, right? Key question. I have to be pretty confident on that, otherwise I'm not going to buy. I might want to know how much weight it can hold. I might want to know how high it will raise to, or how low it will go. And then I might have a preference over whether it's mechanical, electric, that sort of stuff, right? But then my future concern will be, um, if I bought an electric one and I've done my research and I know that electric ones are more liable to break, and to have faults, how do I fix it? Like, what happens if that breaks? Is there a way for me to manually raise it and lower it? Is it going to be stuck in that position? Am I able to be sent a replacement part for that? Do I have to send it off? All these things, like, how much of a nightmare is that going to be for me at that stage? And you can get the same with like clothing, right? What happens if I get a stain on it? How do I wash this? How do I wash this? Does it have to be dry cleaned? All that sort of thing. So there's not only the thought process of, is this the right product for me? It's also kind of, how much of a pain is this going to be to deal with in the future as well? And then you've got similar questions about the business, right? Who are you? Why should I trust you? Do other people trust you? Do you have social proof? All that sort of thing. How do I contact you if something goes wrong? Do you look like a legit business, basically? And then the final part is motivation, which is probably the most important part, because this is what actually gets people over the line, right? If you can help someone find a product on your website, they can select their options, they can read through all the features and everything and go, tick, 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 yeah, it fits my requirements. But if they're not thinking, I need this now, you're going to struggle to get them over the line, right? You've got someone to the point where they're like, okay, I found the product I want, but maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe let me sleep on it, and maybe I'll buy it tomorrow. We don't want that, right? We want people thinking, this is going to be so good for me. I want to order this now so that I get it as quickly as possible, right? We want the sort of people who are going to open up their email every day, click that tracking link for their product, and are checking on the tracking every day, because that's how excited they are to get this product, because they think it's going to be really, really great for them, right? So that's the motivation part, which gets people over the line. And every brand is different, right? So I guess another example would be t-shirts, right? This is true classic. The example I'd use is, and I think this is actually, they're a really good example of this. Without motivation, they're just a t-shirt brand, right? But a plain t-shirt brand, right? And there's thousands of options of those, but with motivation, they are the t-shirt brand to buy from, right? So their messaging, their ads are fantastic, their messaging's great. They go really hard on like who their audience is and why their t-shirts are great for that audience. And that's why they're now, what, $300 million business, probably a bit more right now. As far as I was aware, they came out of nowhere. I've known about them for, I don't know, 18 months, be something like that. And they were already pretty big there. So motivation is kind of scales up, right? Usability, you can probably get away with the basics. Anxiety, you've got to make sure you answer questions and concerns, but you can do that quite factually. But motivation is the piece which is more difficult, requires that real thought process, that messaging, that customer research to understand, like, why do people actually want these products? And in the case of t-shirts, how do I get them to spend a bit more on a t-shirt that I'm saying is going to be better for them?
Yeah. Well, the UAM framework sounds very complete, and I just love every sort of example you gave. Everyone just like super, super in depth. If we go to usability, the first one, you mentioned one thing, and I have a question on that, which is, site speed. I know that this can sometimes be a bit of a debate where it does. I think Google even did a study where every second you get a huge drop off in terms of people on your website. With your experience, how much of an impact or of a needle mover is site speed really on the website? Because sometimes you hear it doesn't change much. Sometimes you say, or you hear it changes a lot, depending on what people say. From your direct experience, how impactful is site speed on a website?
So I think it all depends on it. Well, it would depend a bit on your brand and your category and where and why people are buying.
Mhm,
I guess, things like the higher consideration products, so maybe like insurance
mhm,
and stuff, or products where people are more likely to be on desktop, for example,
yeah,
are going to be less impacted by it
yeah,
because desktop's more likely going to have a faster, more stable internet, whether it's wired in or Wi-Fi. Um, but for most like ecom brands out there who are really heavily advertising on
mhm,
Meta, TikTok, probably getting these. I mean, some of the brands we see, I'd say minimum 65% mobile traffic now.
yeah,
Um, Quite often, we've seen quite a few recently that are about the 80% mark. Right, so for those people, it's much more important.
yeah,
Right,
okay,
you have to be really good with your conversion rate. Sorry, your site speed. Particularly people out and about. Right, if you're, I don't know, sitting at a bar waiting for a friend, browsing your phone, right? That's got to load quickly because every second your website takes to load is a second sooner that person's friend is going to turn up,
yeah, it's true.
right? So you literally got a countdown there working against you. And then I think the other consideration is like how slow your site speed is now,
Okay,
right? If your site is already at the 3, 4, 5 second load speed, you can do a bit of optimization, and you might get a little bit there, fine. But if your site is at the 20, 15, 20, 30 second mark, because it's really under optimized,
yeah,
that's where, you know, it's worth getting an agency in and saying, look, how much money, just fix it,
yeah, yeah,
right? And really, really committing to that. Some brands will say, oh, we'll put a CDN in place, we'll optimize our image sizes and stuff, make sure we're not, overloading the website too much. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. And that's why, if your site speed is bad, it's worth hiring an expert to come in and just fix it for you.
I find that, yeah, very good answer with especially just adding context, bucketing everyone in the same, like site speed is important, sure, but what is the context? Like you said, if you're waiting for a friend, every second is also maybe a second where you're going to get a message, where you're going to be distracted, something is going to happen, you're going to go on Instagram because that's going to be quicker, and you maybe just prefer that. So I love that
Yeah.
answer. If we go now on to anxiety, right? So I'm guessing a lot of the learnings you get from anxiety, what people have as anxieties, like you said with your table, what's the size, how high can it go, how much weight can it hold? You probably learn all that through research, right? But how can you, from the research you do, how can you uncover that this is a real anxiety people want to know about? And sometimes there may be outliers where a couple people mention it, but that won't really move the needle. How's your process like of thinking, okay, this is really an anxiety, a point of something, we need to focus on, and we're going to add this because maybe another thing you mentioned was knowledgeable nudging, which is on your sort of image on the website, which I found super interesting. How do you sort of combine all of that together to just make sure the test ideas are better?
It's research, right? It's doing enough research to be confident that you've got something here.
Hmm.
So if you run, customer surveys and you look into your customer support tickets and you read reviews
Yeah.
for your products and for your competitors, and a certain topic pops up a lot, then that's something to take note of,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if, going back to the standing desk example, that's the most boring example, isn't it? I've got to come up with something better for my podcast.
It's not. It's
Um,
good. It's good.
if you're doing all this research and you've got loads and loads of comments about, oh, it's great, I've got two monitors, a laptop, and this and that on top of it, and it holds it fine, right? So it might not specifically say anything about weight,
Yeah.
but you can tell this person is talking about, like, they've got a lot of stuff on the top of their desk and it's fine.
Yeah.
And you've got all these comments around, yeah, it's great. yeah, I've got like heavy monitors, I've got my desktop on top of it as well, you know, whatever. If you've got all these comments about weight,
Mhm.
then you know that's an important factor for people. What you then might need to do is actually just work out, well, do people care? Do people care just about how much weight can go on it,
Mhm.
or is it more to do with how to explain this? The motor, essentially. Like,
Okay.
how do people just want to know that are people thinking the desk isn't going to collapse if I've got 30 kilos on it,
Yeah.
or are they concerned, will it be able to raise itself on an electric motor with 30 kilos on it? That's the bit you've actually got to kind of work out, and you can also put both in there, right? Because you can put a technical spec on there and say, here are the dimensions, here's how much weight it can hold. But then in the image gallery or in a product video showing it off, that's where you might explain that, the electric motor can, lift the desk with up to 30 kilos on it. Right. And you go into a little bit more detail on it. So you can just position that, not that position that message in similar ways,
Mhm.
but just a bit differently. And that's kind of where the knowledge nudging comes in, as we call it. It's not just repeating the same fact again and again, it's repeating it in slightly different formats so that people think they're reading a new piece of information, but actually it's just the same thing being reinforced again and again.
I think you I find it very funny you say it's a boring example. I don't find it a boring example because it's very technical. And it's true that when it's very technical like that, you need to give a lot of information, but you also need to make sure it's not overwhelming, where it's like, there's these details, there's this. And people are a bit like, okay, this is too much. We just want to go for a simple solution in our mind, which is just to leave the website. Especially if you're waiting for a friend, you're not going to want to focus on all of that, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's just a great example. And I love how, yeah, you just explained of, even if people don't directly say it can hold like 30 kilos worth of my monitor, my whatever, like computer, everything, they're not saying it, but they're talking about the benefit, which for some people may be an anxiety, right? So I think that's just a great
Yeah.
example. Now the last part with motivation, like you said, which is super important, because like I said just now, maybe just because the product is there and it can be a good product doesn't mean they necessarily will want to do it. You need to make them want to buy it, and you need to make them want to buy it with you, right? So how can you get, so yeah, increase motivation? Again, it's from research, right? But how can you try and position it without, maybe also sometimes if it's a limited time, that's available, not make it seem like it's fake, just keep the motivation high. Yeah, basically how can you actually increase motivation is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. So there's three things we look at. Firstly, pain reduction, right?
Mhm.
So what is the pain point your customers have that they're trying to get away from, and how can we convince them that your product will do that, right?
Okay.
So find out what the pain point is, um, and then you might want to do some research into solutions, or you might be able to come up with those solutions yourself because you now know the pain point. But you want to convince people that they will no longer uh, you know, have a problem if they buy your product. The flip side of that is desired outcomes. So what is it someone's trying to achieve instead, right? So sometimes you can position it both ways. So pain reduction might be, um, for example, if you were in the weight loss or like supplement space, you could position your messaging as pain point reduction or pain reduction, but you could also talk about desired outcomes, right? So this is you now. You hate it. You're having problems with being overweight or whatever. Our product will help you get away from that, and you'll be more comfortable. Or you could say, this is what you're going to look like if you use our product for 6 months. Like, how incredible is that, right? So, two ways you can do it, and different categories will work in different ways. So sometimes it's only a pain reduction, sometimes it's only a desired outcome. And then the final part of that is what we call the final frontier, which is that kind of scarcity and urgency. So
Mhm.
there's little nudges over the line. So again, that's that getting someone to think, I need to buy this now, right? So um, like Heights, do you know Heights, the brand, the nutrition brand?
No, I don't
Um,
actually. No.
it's like like a vitamin supplement,
Okay.
a multivitamin.
Okay.
Um, you know, they can convince me that, you know, anxiety wise, right? It's going to be good for me. It's got nothing in it that's going to be bad for me. You know, it's been tested, scientifically tested, whatever. Anxiety is dealt with. Motivation factor is it's supposed to help me with, you know, clarity, focus, generally supposed to make me feel better. But I think that's quite a hard thing to get people to be like, well, I need this now, because I also know that I'm probably going to have to take this for at least 30 days to
Yeah.
see any benefit from it. Right. So what they need to do is try and convince me to buy this now
Mm.
in order to start seeing those benefits. And the way they could do that is say, you know, the classic Amazon thing of, you know, if you buy this today, you'll receive it tomorrow or next day shipping, or it'll be shipped today. You know, we've tested a few different messages, and they've worked in different locations. But yeah, essentially, like that last bit is the scarcity urgency to get people to the point where they are excited about the product and they do want it. And this is just the final bit that gets them thinking, okay, like if I, you know, it's what 10:26 when we're recording this. If I was on a website now and it said, you know, if I order by 11 a.m., I can get it tomorrow,
Yeah.
especially on a Thursday as well, I'd be thinking, well, I need to buy this. I need to get this now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I could be waiting till Monday to get it. Right. So it's just that kind of urgency piece, and then scarcities, you know, similar sort of thing, right?
Mm.
Trying to convince people that they might, you know, they might miss out if they don't buy. But I think the really important thing is to be careful with both of these, because you can't fake it.
Yeah.
Um, you can't misuse it because it's so obvious, right? You know, when you see a timer saying, you know, for example, on True Classic, right? If I was just on their standard PDP for the t-shirts and they had a timer saying, um, we've held one pack for you for 50, we're holding one pack for you for 15 minutes, you know, buy it before you miss out. I'm gonna be there going, there's no way you've only got that one pack of t-shirts for me,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna miss out in 15 minutes if I don't buy this. Like that's rubbish. There's no way you're gonna have that lower stock level. So yeah, you've got to be careful with it. And then I've seen, you know, like X number of people are looking at this product right now and stuff like that. I've not seen too much success with those. I think generally on e-commerce, it's part people don't believe it and part people don't care.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm buying a ticket, you know, if I'm looking at a flight or a hotel, and it tells me that, you know, 7 other people are looking at this flight right now, and there's only 5 seats left, that's going to motivate me to get on with it, because if that's the flight I need to buy it. But generally, commerce, that sort of stuff, I've not seen work too well. I think people are aware that it's not always true
Hmm.
either on a lot of websites. So yeah, I'd be careful with that stuff. Only use it if it's a genuine strong message that you can put in place. Otherwise, it'll probably do more harm than good.
Agreed. Yeah. I think if people can see through the lie, basically, you're just gonna guarantee one thing is that they're never gonna buy from you, and they're probably gonna say negative things as well about you. So that's definitely not something you want to do. Um,
Yeah.
I,
If you've got a limited edition product, absolutely go for it.
of
You
course.
know, absolutely say there's only 1,000 of these available, and then, you know, over time show a ticker, right? Show it that number coming down. That's absolutely fine, because you've genuinely got a reason to put that scarcity on there, right? And likewise, um, you might only run a deal for 2 days, right? Then you could say, you know, you've only got an hour left of the sale, and as long as you're a brand that doesn't extend the sale every 24 hours,
Yeah.
you're good, right? So like Apple, right? If Apple said there's only a day left of this sale, you're going to believe that,
Yeah.
right? And you're going to be thinking, I need to check this out because the next sale is a year away.
Mhm.
Normally, I think they normally do about one a year,
Roughly,
right?
yeah. I think so. But yeah.
Whereas I know supplement brands where I get an email from them every week with a new sale, and that sale gets extended throughout the entire week comes to an end, and the next day another sale starts. Right. So there is no urgency there.
And yeah, I 100% agree. And there's this brand I saw where when you're on the website, it's like this sale is here for the next 24 hours. And the next day you go on the website and it's like this sale is here for the next 24 hours. And it's just an automatic, it's just renewing every time. There's this brand that I'm working with where they sell out so quickly, and on their collection page, a lot of products are sold out. And it's just funny with again user testing, or even calling customers. Sometimes they think it's fake. They just pretend everything is sold out, but they really sell out so quickly, which is why they actually just keep growing, because there is that real urgency. And every time there's a drop, it just gets sold out super quickly. But they're at that point where it doesn't look believable because they sell out so quickly. So I just think that's interesting when you're so successful in terms of what you're doing that people question it a bit, but they're good in
Yeah.
the way to communicate it. So I think, again, I hope everyone listening took down a lot of notes, because in terms of, especially with the motivation, you definitely gave a lot of valuable insights and things to look for, and what to try and add onto the product page, the card page, etc. Let's say now we go on. So you ran a test, and either it's a winner, it just didn't win, or it's inconclusive. What are your steps then in terms of, okay, maybe iterating based off of a winner, learning from a loser, even an inconclusive one? What are your general sort of steps at the end of tests?
So it's always a learning and iteration phase,
Mhm.
right? Regardless of the result of the test. And I guess the big part of it really is we ran that test for a reason,
Yeah.
right? We did the research, we looked into the data, we spoke to customers, we identified a problem, we came up with a solution, and we ran that test. So if it's a winner, great, let's put it live. But then let's think, well, now that we know we can leverage this piece of information, we can leverage this pain point or whatever, where can we go with this next?
Mhm.
Like, how can we make this an even better experience for the customer? Likewise, if we had a negative test result, you've got to look back at it and say, well, why was this a negative result? Was our research actually not good enough? Did we misunderstand what the customers were saying? Or is it just our execution was bad? Right. And we've run tests in the past, where we've had a negative or fairly inconclusive test, and we've looked at it and gone, well, it doesn't make any sense. Why? And then just really thought it through for a bit, and we've gone, actually, the execution was a bit poor on this. That we needed. I remember one where we were trying to get people to click something to then show more information, and the original hook was just weak.
Okay.
So we just weren't really getting the clicks on it, and so it was pretty much a flat result. But then when we improved the hook, we were getting more people to click on it. That's where we saw that increase in conversion rate, because now people were seeing the message that we wanted to put in front of them.
Mm.
So for everything you're doing, there should be like test, learn, and iterate, because otherwise there's probably no point spending all that time on the research if you're not going to do the learning and iteration stage, because you might as well just guess and make up tests.
Yeah, I agree. Love that everything is an iteration, and everything is something you can learn from. I'm just wondering, often, especially on social media with LinkedIn, Twitter, you see a lot of people always talking about the sort of general tests to run, with adding maybe some benefits, some social proof, the sort of, classic best practices, I would say, which in the right context can perform really, really well, obviously. But from your experience, you just mentioned that people click on a button to get more information. What are some uncommon testing ideas you've tested and that have just gotten really, really good results that most people don't think about?
We've done a few where we've added a call to action to the page,
Mhm.
to get people to click it to get more information, and we made that quite prominent. So on one brand, a jewelry brand, we did it as more of a motivation factor. So we explained, why the products were so great, um, why this jewelry was like waterproof and stuff, and people never had to take it off, and that worked really well. And we made it like a kind of a letter from the founder. That worked really well. And then for another brand, we did it as more of the anxiety piece, because we literally just had a pop up which displayed the technical information about the product. Right, it was a bottle, and we just said, here's how much it holds, here's how much it weighs, here's dimensions, it's dishwasher safe, here's how you open it up to clean it. We just gave people information, and both of those worked really well. But on most websites, that information's just in a product description tab halfway down the page, and you don't see it. So those have worked really well. And the other one we've been testing, we test every now and again, is just removing apps,
Okay.
like testing removing apps that are designed to push motivation in a way, but it's more that scarcity urgency piece rather than genuine motivation about the product, right?
Okay.
So, and this is probably a whole extra podcast episode, really. I think the problem we've got in the app ecosystem at the moment is a lot of apps promise they overpromise, underdeliver.
Hmm.
Right? They'll promise big conversion rate uplifts, big AOV uplifts, but they don't tell you that you've got to do a lot of work with these apps.
Yeah.
You can't just install them, put the basic settings in place, and let it run. You have to have someone who's monitoring them, testing them. You've got a strategy behind it, and so partly because of that, I think we're in this situation where some people are avoiding going to a CRO agency to improve their conversion rates, because it's like, well, why would I spend 5, 6, 7,000 a month, sometimes more, sometimes like 10 plus, if I can get this app for $299 that tells me it's going to improve my conversion rates by 30%.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good point. True. Because it sounds too good to be true. It's just install this and it's going to be optimized. But there's so much more that goes into it. Like you said, there's the person that's going to use it. The person needs to understand also what they want to optimize. And yeah, it is a pity that maybe some of these tools, they create just a misconception, which may be another one, a misconception, which is an app is going to do all of the work that an entire agency with years of experience, could do for you, but just better. So I'm curious then, in with your perspective, what are your thoughts then for the future of CRO? I had a great chat with a friend of mine recently who he's learning a lot about generative AI with CRO. So it's testing hypotheses, it's coming up with hypotheses if you give it some context. For you, where do you see the space of CRO going in near future?
Um, yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think CRO, ideally, I want to see CRO broaden out to
Mm.
what, like, kind of to what we view it as, what I described earlier as customer revenue optimization. There are a lot of agencies out there who just do A/B testing, and it's basically a few best practices. They've got a list of tests they'll run. They outsource everything to make it super cheap. There's probably not much actual statistical analysis going into it. So as soon as they can claim a win with a tool, that's what goes live. So I do want to see a move away from just A/B testing and into, like, how can CRO be of benefit to a business? And then just on the AI side, yeah, we use AI quite a lot. Um, we use it more for analysis of data at the moment, because it's good for that. I've not had, I've not really had it come up with many good creative solutions to things. I've found, even if we feed it a load of data and say, we have this problem, people aren't adding to cart, whatever. Here's all our research and analysis that's gone into this. It's not come up with anything creative. It's just come up with, you know, what every other website does and things like that. So yeah, I think maybe it'll get there. Maybe it'll be useful. But I know there are some tools out there, or tools on the way, that are designed to kind of, what was the one I looked at the other day? I think you literally just, like, you put your website URL in and it will come up with some test ideas for you. And I was like,
Yeah.
how?
Yeah.
What's it basing these ideas on? Like, it's got no research or anything. So all it can be doing is saying, here's a list of best practices for a
Exactly.
website.
Yeah.
Does this website meet these? If not, suggest a test for one of those.
Yeah. Agreed. I had a preview the other day of one of those testing tools, which you just said, you put your store URL in, and it just basically does come up with best practices. Maybe there's the headline, it just comes up with another way of saying the headline by saying the same thing, so using different words. So it
Yeah.
sounds cool and it sounds
Uh,
nice to think AI optimizes, your website, but at the end, like you said, there's no data, qualitative or quantitative, and it doesn't focus on solving a problem. It just focuses on doing the same but just differently. So I
yeah.
hope that I'm just not looking deep enough into generative AI, and there are some tools and platforms doing like a deeper or better job with that.
I think we probably demoed the same tool the
Probably,
other day, because I know someone else who demoed it as well, and his feedback was slightly more critical than mine. Um, but I was just because AI side, I think AI should be soon really good at helping you work out where the problems are
yeah. Hmm.
with your website, and able to look into like all the data together and all your different cohorts and channels and everything to say, here are the points where PPC users on mobile tend to get stuck, and all that sort of thing. But it should then still be up to like a person to actually come up with that creative solution on how to fix this,
Yeah.
because the AI, yeah, I've not seen any evidence that AI can come up with those creative solutions to fixing those problems.
Agreed. Agreed. I think it could be good at maybe triangulating data from different data sources, saying there's a drop here in terms of behavior. We see that this could also be the cause, and then it's up to a human to come up with the creative side of, okay, we can solve this problem this way, because there are different ways of solving problems, obviously. So that's
Yeah.
that's how other people can try and or where the future goes for CRO and AI. I'm curious, before we go into the rapid fire questions, what are the plans for your agency in the near future? What are the plans there?
Scale.
Nice.
Yeah. We've been launching a few different offers recently. So in addition to our just full service CRO, we're now doing landing pages. Is a is just It's a big opportunity, right?
Yeah.
A lot of brands want landing pages, and so to be able to be a CRO agency that can offer that, I think that's really important. And then we're also, kind of related to what I mentioned earlier around, we will help brands with discounting or with returns or with customer service efficiency. We are looking at how to break that out
Okay.
into, potentially almost like a modular program, right? Where, instead of saying, okay, a brand is going to hire us for 3 months, we'll have a chat with them, sit down and decide what we want to do. We should be able to put it together and say, you based on your requirements, we recommend this module, this module, this module, and that's how much it costs. So yeah, we're just looking at trying to be a bit more flexible on that side. And yeah, just scale for now.
Yeah. No, no.
That's kind of the plan.
Sounds like an interesting and exciting plan. Great ideas. I think, especially like you said, offering landing pages as a CRO agency just gives so much more weight to the quality of the landing pages. It's not, again, based on best practices. It's, we've done research, we see what works. Here's the highest chance of a landing page being optimized for conversions for the traffic that it's receiving. So love that, and excited to see customers who click, grow, and scale. Are you ready for the rapid fire questions?
I'm not, because I'm terrible at these, but go on then.
Same. I'm terrible as well. So I mean, this two negatives make a positive in maths, I guess, right? So it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
So, other than CRO, what's your favorite topic to learn about?
uh History.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big, I like to read history books. I wouldn't say I've got any particular focuses. So right now I'm actually reading about Rockefeller,
okay, nice.
reading his the book about him. It's really really interesting. I just find it really really interesting, just reading about like this guy's background, and how became the richest man in the world,
Yeah,
right? And then other times I'll be reading about like ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, Napoleonic Wars, whatever.
yeah,
But yeah, just history really grips me. So yeah, I think when I'm not in the CRO e-commerce marketing sort of phase,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm most likely going to be reading a history book.
I agree. History is fascinating because, like you said, Rockefeller, for example, it's super interesting to try and get into that person's brain and see how were they thinking at that point to become so incredibly successful. I think
Yeah.
I was listening to a biography or autobiography about him where I think he was, didn't he buy chicken or he bought chicken to sell eggs to people as well? So I guess he was always just an entrepreneur at heart, solving problems and selling things for people, right?
Yeah, and he was, and I mean, something I think is I'm getting from this, which is really important, is he was super on it with his numbers and his finances.
Okay.
Right? If he needed, if the bit about in this book is he's like a bookkeeper for
Yeah.
like a trading company, so quite early in his career, and he's like, this company owes us 2 cents, so we need to go collect that debt.
Hmm.
And obviously, I guess 2 cents was quite a bit more money back in those days, but it's still, I think to them, it was still only 2 cents.
Yeah.
So, but he was very much like, that's what I'm going to do. And there are other examples where he says he just gave a lot of money to charity, and apparently, if he said, I'm going to give 15 cents to this charity, there's nothing you could do to persuade him to give a little bit more or a little bit less. Like once he decided that's the number,
Yeah.
that was the number, and it was done.
Mm, okay. So what I'm getting from this is I know what I'm going to do this weekend. I'm going to learn about accounting and being better with finances and my numbers. Because if he's so strict and clear on everything, there's no reason we shouldn't be.
That's what I
Second,
mean, especially with he had physical handwritten books to take all these notes in.
yeah, yeah, of
I've got apps on my phone, right? I should be able to keep track of this better than he did.
course. We've got Google Sheets as well. We've got Excel. We've got no excuses not to know every cent if he had to do everything on paper and a pen. So
Yeah.
definitely we need to do that. If you if you could have dinner with anyone that is alive or that has ever lived, who would it be and why?
Um my head, I have to go with what my head went straight to, which was Sir Alex Ferguson.
Okay.
So I'm a big Man United fan.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, we'd love to sit down with him and obviously talk a little bit about the current situation and be like, what is going on? But also just like back through his career and like how he took the approach he did and why he did that as well.
Mhm.
He's got a really good book called is it Leading? I think it's Leading,
Okay.
um, which he wrote 7 or 8 years ago, I think, released 7 or 8 years ago, and it went all the way back to when he was at Aberdeen. And I think he got invited over to Bayern Munich to just watch their training.
Hmm.
Right. So he was learning from one of the best teams in the world at that point and was able to take some of that learning back. And then it goes all into all his thoughts about um like how he built the squad and
Okay.
how he refreshed that squad over time, and how, I think he said he only ever had like one actual world class player at a time, really. There might have been two at a couple of stages, but generally, you know, people over egg it at the moment and list, half a squad as world class when, he was like, realistically, you've probably got one world class player. You've got a bunch of players who are incredible,
Hmm.
and then you've got your players who are squad players but will do anything for the team. Right. So, but back for us, I think his examples were like Gary Neville, Roy Keane, John O'Shea, players who weren't that great, but they gave everything for the team, and that made up for maybe a little bit of technical, um, being not as good on the technical side. So yeah, I think it's really interesting to sit down with him and have a chat.
It sounds like it would be a very interesting conversation. Yeah, I was going to ask what is a question you would ask him, but you kind of answered that question as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, a very very interesting answer. For the next one now, if you could only have one research method, you could only use that for new clients that you onboard, which one would it be, and why would that be the research method you go for?
Um, depends how. general I can be with this. Customer research.
No, that's too broad. That's too
Is it
broad.
too broad?
Yeah.
Um, oh, customer surveys, email surveys, I
Okay.
think.
Okay.
Yeah, because you can get a lot of information through them. The quality is a bit, it doesn't go quite as deep as maybe interviews
Yeah.
and speaking to people, but you can get far more information from them, from more people.
Okay.
And so I guess it comes back to your point around when people are talking about their, anxieties, motivations, and
Yeah.
what the information that's important to them. If you've only got time to interview 10 people and a piece of information comes up twice,
Yeah.
and the most a topic comes up is 3 times, let's say,
Hmm.
how important is that piece of information?
Yeah.
Whereas if you can get email responses from 200 people and a
Yeah.
topic comes up 50 times, you're reasonably more confident that that's actually a problem.
Yeah.
Um, the difficulty, of course, is you've got to be much more on point with what your questions are
Yeah.
in that email survey, because if you get it wrong and people answer badly, that's it. You
Yeah.
can't do anything about it. Where at least in an interview, you can go back and say, "Oh, and dig in a little deeper, or like rephrase the question or something." So yeah, I think I would probably still go with email surveys.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
Interesting one. Okay. Yeah, I agree. If you just have 10 people to ask, it may be outliers and it maybe doesn't give you anything valuable. If 50 people mention the same problem or they say it differently, like you said, you said with the idea of the desk is they maybe don't all complain about the weight, but they may be happy about how much weight they could put on. You just learn a lot more from that. So I
yeah.
think that's a good
I
one.
am. I am gonna. I'm testing something soon
Okay.
with a brand, which is it's kind of in between email surveys and interviews.
Okay.
Um, it'd be interesting to see how it goes. I'm not going to give too much information away right now. Um, but yeah, we're trying to get like audio responses
Oh,
from people, because my expectation is that we're going to get more detailed feedback than we would with a email survey.
yeah.
Um, but we'll get fewer responses, and we'll get a bit less detailed feedback than interviews, because we still only get to ask the question once.
Yeah.
Um, but we will get far more responses than we would with interviews.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping it will sit in that nicely in that middle ground of we're getting enough responses and enough detailed responses to make it better than either of those two options.
Definitely, that's a very very good idea because I also think if you think logically, which may not be the case, but if people take the time to record a voice response, it's going to be a lot more than quality is good, or I like the taste. It's going to be a lot more like I like this. They're going to talk about their story, maybe why they bought it. So you may have, like you said, less people if it or compared to if it's just writing, but the context and the amount of information you get is going to be so much more valuable. So that's a very
Well,
interesting one.
I guess the thing came out of actually doing LinkedIn content,
Okay.
right? So I was doing some collaborative content with people, and I was sending some people a little survey to fill in. Just gave them their questions basically and said, "Look, here's the topic. Could you give me your feedback on this, 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 this?" And then I just decided to do it in this video, also audio format. And I said, "Look, if you could just record your answers for me, I then get the transcript and I can turn that into the content." And the answers are so much more detailed than I was getting in writing, because
Okay.
once you get someone speaking about a topic, if they start to get interested and excited about it, they'll just keep talking,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Exactly.
until they, sometimes until they think they're overdoing it and they'll cut themselves off. But a lot of people will keep talking. So yeah, I've got high hopes for this, but again, it might need a little bit of testing and learning
Yeah.
what it will. Um, and it's going to be a case, what are the questions we need to ask to get the right answers? Because this really is a, a one-off,
Yeah.
right? I can't ask someone to record an answer every week or
No.
every month for us. I'm gonna get one go at this, um, and then we'll need a new set of customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Yeah, I'm
Exactly, I
pretty
agree.
confident.
Yeah, that's a very. I really look forward to hearing from you how that goes. Because, like you said, I also think the quality of the question is going to be super important. And how can you maybe frame it in a way where they want to talk a lot, but it doesn't feel like it's a lot of work for them to do as well. So I think once you sort of
Yeah,
get really clear on how you can get a lot of responses, good responses, and quality from it, it's going to be really good. And I think by the point or by the time people cut themselves off because they think they talk too much, you've got so much insight and so much interesting
yeah.
sort of potential data to use. Um,
What I'm really hoping we'll get actually is comments like they'll go off on one angle and then they'll stop themselves and go, oh no, actually, like thinking about it,
yeah,
I use it for this.
yeah,
Or like so getting them talking will get them thinking and they'll change direction. Whereas I think if we're getting people to type it out,
yeah,
um, either that process won't happen
hmm
because they're focused on typing,
yeah.
or they won't type out that change of direction because it's more effort.
True, true. That's a very good point. Maybe it's just like, okay, let me just go through all of it. I see I have 5 questions. First thought that comes to mind, let me type it in. Next question, and you're not even thinking about it again. But if as you're talking, you're a bit like, well, that's not true. Actually, I didn't buy it for that reason, or actually, I also liked it for this reason. Then yeah, you get a lot more insight. You said you can't talk too much about it. Can you sort of say a little bit what kind of tools you're using, or is that maybe to be learned on a later date?
That's a bit of the secret to it. So
Okay,
I'm,
okay.
I'm going to
So
leave that bit out for now. But
you already gave a lot of great value on that, and just a great idea, which I hope not too many people are going to start using. Because if everyone's going to use it, then it's going to be a little bit like one for the customers. I'm not going to record 10 different voice messages talking about why I bought this product, that product, and all that. So
yeah,
that's a very, very good point, though. And I see that we're really bad at these rapid fire questions because it's not really rapid.
no,
What is it?
I forgot we were in the rapid fire
No,
section
but
actually.
I'm very, very glad you mentioned it because it's a super interesting thing and it's just definitely something that can be tested. And I think the data from that could be super valuable. It could be, yeah, like you said, just super valuable because people just talk a lot as I'm doing right now. So let me go into the next question, which is because I'm pretty sure you posted about this on LinkedIn as well, which is what's your favorite meal or your favorite food?
Um, I think it's a bit of a difficult one because I do really like food, and it's very much like mood dependent, weather dependent. Um, but I think if I had to pick something, it'd probably be Mexican.
Okay.
Um, I love like good tacos,
Yeah.
amazing, good burrito. I like ceviche.
Wow.
Ceviche is delicious. Yeah, and we've got some really good Mexican places in London now,
Mm,
um, which is really good. But that's
okay.
yeah, it's a difficult one.
So if you're stranded on an island and the only thing you could have growing off the trees, it would be Mexican food.
Yeah, 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 probably.
Let's go with
I think I
that.
think that worked really well on desert island though. So
Very well.
that'd be perfect. If it was a desert island and you said the only thing you could have is like a pasta,
Yeah,
I think that'd be great for a little bit, and then I think
yeah.
you'd get a bit bored of that.
Very soon you kind of want to starve yourself to death at that point. But
Yeah.
do you? Okay, last one then is actually I still got two. Still got three actually. What's your favorite movie?
Um, I don't know. The Gladiator, maybe.
Oh, going back to
Gladiator's al-
history.
Gladiator's always been up there. I
Yeah.
do like Shawshank Redemption, but I feel like I've not watched that for quite a while.
Okay.
Um, Gladiator. I do like the Lord of the Rings films as well.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I think they're making a Gladiator 2, aren't they?
yeah. Should be out at some point.
Yeah.
I feel like they've been talking about it for quite a while now. But
Yeah.
but in the kind of like it's almost ready, and they've been filming it for ages and stuff. It's like, well, why haven't we got it yet? Come on, where is it?
The hype, yeah, they're hyping it up a ton. Do you have a favorite? So you talked about history you're learning and all that, but do you have maybe a favorite book or a favorite podcast to read or listen to other than your podcast,
Uh,
obviously, which is filled with value?
yeah, um, yeah. Either there's two history podcasts that I listen to. One is called Real Dictators,
Okay,
which sort of pretty self-explanatory. It's normally, a handful of episodes about a dictator
Okay.
at a time, but quite detailed. So that's really good. And there's one called The Rest is History,
Oh,
which is more just, each episode is just its own topic about, whatever they feel like talking about at that time. So that's definitely one where, you can scroll through the episodes a bit until you find one that you like the look of.
yeah.
Whereas Real Dictators, obviously, once you start on someone, it kind of makes sense to finish that person,
Of course.
unless
Yeah.
you're really not finding it interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's difficult to not find dictators interesting because I think the mindset you also have to have, the things they go through, everything is just incredible, and it's just interesting to study these people, uh, especially like some people throughout history, what they've done. I think it's difficult to relate with them, but maybe those people would also be interesting to have dinner with. Not for too long, to just make sure that nothing too bad happens, but just to pick their brain a little bit. That would be interesting. And now,
Yeah,
last
yeah, I know what you
question.
mean.
Yeah. Is what's the proudest moment of your career?
Uh, probably probably customers who click.
Okay.
Um, or maybe a bit more specifically, getting to 200 episodes with our podcast,
Oh, nice.
right?
Okay.
Because we're on, what was it, 210? I think 210 was this week.
Hmm.
Well, the week that we're recording this. Um, so yeah, I think I'm really proud of the fact that that's kept going
Yeah.
almost weekly. The only break was a self-enforced break. It wasn't because we couldn't get a guest or something. I wanted to take a break
Yeah.
and rethink it a little bit. So yeah, 210 episodes now.
Wow.
Um, and we've
Very
got
impressive.
quite a few more booked up. So yeah, yeah, I'm really really happy with that actually. That's
Congrats on that. That is very impressive.
done really well.
I heard on another podcast from Chris Williamson, I believe. He said that most podcasts, 99% of them, stop before I think it's either the 15th or the 21st episode, which means I don't know how factually correct this is, right? But in order to be in the top 1%, you have to just have done more than 21 episodes. So I think you're very high up in the 0.00001% of people that have done 200 episodes, which is massive.
So that I mean, I heard a stat which I thought sounded ridiculous, which was some huge percentage of podcasts don't get past, I think it was 3 episodes. And I was, yeah, it was definitely some of that because I remember thinking I launched with 3 episodes. Like
Okay.
literally went live with 3 episodes. So,
Yeah.
and I had a couple more lined up. So I was like, how? Yeah, I suppose it's with it being so easy to launch a podcast, anyone can do it without much thought at all. So you probably are taking into account a lot of podcasts which should never have even started, right? As opposed to the podcast where there was a genuine reason, but people have just done it badly and
Yeah.
gotten bored or whatever.
Agreed. But I think there also goes a lot more work into a podcast than people think. It's not just having a conversation, it's
Yeah.
actually choosing the guest, getting them to get on the podcast, having an interesting conversation, editing, just everything, and continuously doing that. And I'm thinking maybe sometimes people, they have a list of like 5 to 10 people they want to talk to, and that's it. And then they got to keep the podcast alive, which is maybe why after 15 or 20, it sort of slowly goes downhill, from there, or they just stop.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to build a process, as with everything, right? Build a
Exactly.
process. Um, I need to work on kind of booking more guests. My problem earlier this year was I overbooked, so um, I ended up having conversations with people who had interest in being on the podcast, but I knew that they weren't. If we recorded, within the next week or two, their episode wasn't going to go live for about 4 months.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's when I had to pull it back and say, I'm overdoing it. I'm overbooking this.
Okay.
Um, but then you don't want to get into a period where suddenly you are basically on LinkedIn messaging everyone you actually have a good relationship with and saying, oh, are you free next week to jump on the
Yeah,
podcast,
of course. The
and fill a gap.
quality also needs to be there. I think quantity and quality, there just needs to be a balance. But these
Yeah.
rapid fire questions have been very very interesting, and I'm glad we went into more depth than just a quick answer and that's it.
Yeah.
Just all in all, Will, you're just an absolute legend. This is a super, super interesting episode. I'm really looking forward to rewatching it and just picking up a lot of the details that I've missed. For everyone listening, what are some other things you just want to mention quickly, and then also where can people follow you to follow your journey?
LinkedIn is the best place to follow me. I share content, CRO content pretty much every day. Um, tips, case studies, general advice, and the podcast, of course. And we've also, by the time this comes out, we'll have launched a CRO checklist. So it'll be available on our website. But the best thing to do would be find me on LinkedIn, Will Laurenson, and it'll be on my featured things there. It's a list of, I think it's 385 points across the website that that people should be looking at and considering for optimizing their website.
Amazing. Well, from the depth of this conversation we've had today, I know that's going to be super valuable. So I'll also add the link in the description of this episode so that anyone that wants to see it can also just very, very quickly get it there and follow you on LinkedIn as well. So, Will, thank you so much for your time today. It's been super interesting, as every conversation with you is. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me. It's been absolutely wonderful. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Love it.